you get to watch a few videos, you get to implement a few projects, you have access to projects and support, instant support, one-to-one sessions. We have quite a number of different sessions that we hold, and this masterclass session as well. And so today's what we'll be doing today is actually to have a feel of what things look like in the real world. Okay. Some of you guys are very close to start looking for work. Some have already started looking for work. Some have literally just gotten their job and they're just getting to understand more about the real world. So what I'm going to be sharing today is to give you an idea how things are done in the real world, basically. Okay. Now with DevOps, you understand there is a whole lot of tools. Now, the fact that we use a particular tool does not mean that it has to be used by everyone or every team or every organization. It's down, actually, thanks for asking that question, Duke. So I'm going to start the recording now. For some reason.
Recording in progress.
Thanks, Tipo. I saw that message pop up. So yeah, so this is being recorded now. So just in case you miss out on anything, you get the recording. And if you're not on our Slack channel, which is our community, that's where you can catch me there. Instant messaging is very, very fast there. So that's where we would normally send the videos. But if for any reason you do not receive it in your email, which you should, just make sure you check your spam, promotion folder and all that. That's where you will find it. Okay. So like I was saying, we're going to be touching base on a few tools. And as you already know, or may not know, DevOps has a huge number of tools and it keeps adding to the number every single time. So there's always a new tool that has been introduced, whether it's an enterprise tool or open source. There's always one tool that does a few things. And different teams have different problems that they're trying to solve. So the fact that you learn a particular tool and know it very well does not mean that when you start working, you have to impose it on your teams, or it's going to be that tool that's going to be used anywhere you go. Basically, tools are just there to solve specific problems. And every team, every organization have their own unique problems that one tool may not solve while another may solve very well. Okay. So the reason I've said this upfront is because we're going to be using a few tools and I'll tell you what they do while we're using them. Now, you can go ahead and learn similar tools that does the same thing. Now, some of you are familiar with some tools already. On purpose, I have chosen not to use them so that you can get familiarity with another one that will be working with. And there are times that you work with teams that you can start up with a particular tool, and it just happens that somewhere down the line, that tool is no longer satisfying your needs. So you shouldn't be too bent on carrying on using whatever tool you started with. It's fine to do a spike, which basically means an investigation to understand how can this new tool help us in what we're trying to achieve? What are the pros and cons? What do we have to consider when we're moving away from our old tool to introduce a new tool? Is it going to be more pain than gain? If it's not, what is your strategy going to be when it comes to the whole migration process and all that? Okay, so having said all of that, I'm going to share my screen now. We'll just quickly go through some of the things that we've been doing before now. And then we'll go through what we'll be doing in today's session. So I've got two screens, actually three. So I've got one over there, and my laptop right here. So sometimes I'll look like this just to ensure that we're still communicating, because this is where my camera is. But if I look that way, just know I'm looking at something there, I'm looking at something, but I'll be sharing my screens from time to time or drag things around if I feel like I need to show you something. Okay. If you want to ask any question, feel free to drop messages in the chat box. From time to time, I'll just go through there and have a look. All right. And yeah, let's get started. Any questions so far? Cool. Yeah, I'm looking for my Visual Studio now. Got quite a number open, so just spend 1 second. Okay, got you. Okay, so I'm going to be sharing the screen right there. So most of the time I'll be looking that direction. All right, so let's expand this for a bit. I'll move this mic a bit backward. I hope you can still hear me though. All right, so, okay, brilliant, thanks. So far in the last few weeks, when we started talking about pipelines and some tools. We set up some tools in Kubernetes. Now it is as this session actually assumes that you have Kubernetes knowledge, at least the basics, at least. Okay, so most of the things is going to be within the Kubernetes ecosystem. And we did some exploration on Cert-manager. If you remember, where we talked about the fact that we have to encrypt our traffic, communications lines over the wire, and managing certificates can be very, very difficult. And so we talked about the fact that we need some kind of tool that will help us do dynamic certificate management, because we can't keep on putting monitoring in place to tell us when certificates are going to expire. And then we put some manual scripts to say, oh, go ahead, fetch us a new certificate or something like that. We should be able to just work seamlessly, and some tool is just there doing its job and we don't really have to worry about it. And that is Cert-manager. And we did our configuration with cluster issuer. Actually, maybe what I will do is I'll just open up a terminal so that we can just keep going through things as we go. So for example, I'll do kubectl get namespace, Cert-manager. Okay, so we do have Cert-manager installed. And if I do get cluster issuer, we have a cluster issuer called Let's Encrypt code here that is configured to issue certificates from Let's Encrypt. Okay, so what that means for us is anytime we do our Ingress configuration to expose our traffic over the internet, we're able to hook it up with Cert-manager that ensures that we have the private key and the certificate that takes care of TLS for us. Then we spent some time as well with Ingress controller. And this is what allows us to dynamically manage our proxy, so that rather than deploy a service that will always provision a load balancer in our cloud provider, which can be very expensive. You can imagine having hundreds of applications running in our Kubernetes. If you use the service type of load balancer for each one of them, that's going to run into a lot of cost. And apart from the cost, the overhead of having a lot of load balances. So there's a number of options when it comes to having some controller that handles Ingress for us. There is Nginx, which is able to do Ingress controller. There is also a few other tools. They all have their pros and cons. They have some have some features, while some do not have, depending on what you're trying to do. There is Istio, there is Kong, there is Traffic. There's quite a number of them out there, but Nginx is the most popular, even though most of the other ones actually have a lot more features on them. But the learning curve of the other ones can be quite steep. Okay, setting up Istio used to be really, really hard. Right now, it's even much better because there are Helm charts, there are good documentation that literally gives you code snippets of what we need to deploy, the CRDs and all those things, and get you going with Istio. So if you have time somewhere down the line, get your hand on Istio or Kong or Traffic, just to understand the differences of their specific way of working. But we have deployed Nginx Ingress controller. So I believe that should be in. So if I do get port in Ingress, should be Nginx. So if I do get Ingress, let's try the other way around. Ingress Nginx. Okay, so what I'll do, I can't remember the name it is, but I can do get namespace and then grep for Ingress. Okay, so it's actually called Ingress. So we have our Ingress controller deployed in Ingress. And by the way, the cluster that I was using in the last few weeks is not the same I'm using right now. It's a new cluster. So just in case a few things have changed, it's still the same thing. It's probably just the name that changed. So don't get confused by anything, just in case you're watching the previous video and then you're catching up on this one. Okay. All right. And then Artifactory. So we also talked about the fact that you can use Artifactory for your private Docker registry and Helm repository as well. So if you don't want to use Docker Hub private registry, because even with Docker Hub, you can have private registries there, you can pay for it. But there are other tools that you can also use. Amazon have their own ECR where you can use to store your Docker images. But in terms of Helm, the only way Amazon is able to support Helm would be through S3. So you can configure your S3 to store your Helm charts. Okay. But that, at the end of the day, they all have pros and cons. That's one thing you always have to be aware of. And it's always important before you make decisions on things, make sure you go on the internet, do research, read blog posts from other people, hear from other people's opinion, their experiences using those tools, and try to make sense comparing what you are trying to do. So for example, at Diary.io, we use Amazon AWS to host our services. And initially, we configured S3 to host our Helm charts. But somewhere down the line, we introduced another tool to handle continuous deployment for us. And that tool did not work well with S3 configured chart. So you can imagine this is a typical example of scenarios where you have to pivot and make changes and switch things around. So the fact that you start using a particular tool does not mean you have to be bent on it. Somewhere down the line, you may need to make changes to things because probably new requirements come along. But again, sometimes that change may never be possible just because the pain it will introduce will be more than the gain you will get as well. So it's always about researching, trying to understand things, and just understanding the product as well. Okay, so one of the reasons why I have seen some companies use Artifactory is because it's like a one-stop shop for a lot of things. So you can use Artifactory for your Helm charts, for your Docker registry. You can use it even for your Terraform remote state, okay? And even for your other applications, if you're a Java-based shop, your build jars and artifacts and everything, can go in there. It even does scanning of Docker images as well. So if you have a relevant license, you're able to use it to scan your not only Docker images, even your applications, your build artifacts. It can do a lot of scanning to tell you when there are critical vulnerabilities that you need to be aware of. So very, very nice tool there. Now we also set up Jenkins. So with Jenkins, one of the most important things that we were trying to solve in the deployment was actually to see how we can bring Jenkins up without doing any manual configuration. So obviously using Helm to do the deployment, and then being able to use the values file to drive the configuration. So I'll walk you through it shortly. We'll go through the values file as well, because we're going to do a few changes there today as well. Anyway, okay, so but working with Jenkins configuration as code is one of the big things, such that as you're provisioning your Jenkins instance, it comes up with all the jobs and multi-branch pipelines or whatnot that you want to have, even your credentials, without having to go into Jenkins to do things manually. Because at the end of the day, what is DevOps about? DevOps is about helping your organization to be able to release software in a fast manner and releasing quality software as well. So those two things are very, very important ingredients when you're talking about DevOps. Fast releases, quick releases, and quality releases. Now, to drive things like that, there is heavy dependence on automation. So you want to limit as much as possible manual things that you get to do. So with Jenkins, there is the possibility for you to do things manually and just have a completely bad drift in your configuration. And then when you get to that position, it becomes hard for you to even bring down your Jenkins. You'll be scared to even destroy your Jenkins and bring it back up, because by the time it comes back up, there is no guarantee that you would have exactly what you had before. Okay, and that's where you now start thinking about, oh, backup, restore, disaster recovery, all those kind of things. But if you're able to practice configuration as code as much as possible, you wouldn't even have to really think about the pain that losing an infrastructure is going to cause. Okay, you would just focus on the persistent data, you back that up, but the actual configuration of the tool itself, you wouldn't have to worry about it. If it goes down, if anything happens to it, just bring it back up with the code that you have and everything works fine. Then we also worked extensively with Helm. So understanding how Helm works, using it for releases, being able to do roll forwards and roll backwards, all those kind of things, and even working with Artifact Hub, where you can go ahead and find already made Helm charts that you can just use to deploy the solution, which is exactly what we use to deploy our Artifactory and Jenkins. Even Cert-manager, Ingress controller, all those tools, you can literally go to your Artifact Hub and search for things. So I think I have it right here. So this is Artifact Hub.io. You can just search for anything. For example, searching for Jenkins, we bring up Jenkins, and if you go there, it tells you exactly what you need to do to install Jenkins. You add the repo, and then you just run the deployment. Okay, so enough said about what we have done so far, but what we're going to be doing today is to now focus on the tooling app. So if you have been working on Diary.io for some time, if you've done all the projects from project 1 to at least project 15, you understand that one of the tools that you get to work on is the tooling app, where you have to deploy it, starting off from provisioning EC2 instances and doing things manually on virtual machines. Now that we've gotten to this stage, we want to see how it looks like containerizing that solution, the whole deployment, what it looks like from a CI/CD perspective, and things like that. Now, quickly to talk about Jenkins again, so something just came to my mind. So remember when I said that tools are there to solve problems, but there are different options. Why different options available that satisfies the same solution, basically, that's able to do the same thing. So With Jenkins, it's a CI/CD tool, but there is a whole lot of other options. Okay, so there is GitHub Actions, there is GitLab CI, there is Drone, Bitbucket have their own. So there is a whole lot of different options out there. Jenkins is just one of the oldest ones, even though a lot of organizations are now looking outside of Jenkins to use things like GitHub Actions and GitLab CI. You'll find out that even when you get a job, they still use Jenkins. So before you get to the point where there's probably zero people using Jenkins out there, it will still take a long time, okay? It will still take a long time. The reason being that a lot of legacy systems have a lot of reliance on Jenkins, some plugins that are tightly coupled with their pipelines, and it's just not that easy to get away with it and can start using it. But for most startups and new companies and new projects, chances are that they will be looking in the lines of the modern tools. Okay. So today our focus is on Jenkins. Some other time we will focus on the other options. So learning Jenkins is also very, very important. One of the reasons why people are trying to look away from it is just because you have to understand a bit of Groovy to be able to really work with Jenkins. Okay, so well, that's that. Okay, so now with the tooling app, it's a PHP application. Okay, we have, let me see if I have it here. So we have a repository. So let me go to our direct DevOps on GitHub. So we have this tooling app right here. So in this repo, there is a HTML folder. So it has all the CSS and PHP and all that files. I hope you guys can still hear me because I've just been talking and I'm not sure if I am communicating at all. So please let me know. Let me see if
that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay, brilliant. Cool. Thank you. All right. So, okay, someone is asking what is an artifact. Okay, we'll get to that shortly. Okay, so we're talking about this tooling app. So this repository, and then it has a Docker file in here. So a Docker file has been written here that basically sets a couple of environment variables, and it does install a few tools that the PHP application requires to work, and then ultimately copies the application, which is from the HTML folder, into the container in the var www folder, changes the permission, and then runs this start Apache, which basically means to run the process, to run the PHP application. Okay, so that's what that does. But it also has this, let's go back into this HTML folder. It also has this .m file where it expects to have some environment variables set. So the environment variables it expects is the IP address of the database to connect to, the username, the password, and the name of the database to use. So basically, it's going to connect to a database, and it expects a certain schema to be there, ready to go. So the moment the application is able to connect to it, you'll be able to load up the front end that the application is going to be using. Now, there is another file here, which is the toolingdb schema.sql. So this is the schema, a very basic schema that actually creates a table, inserts some random data into one of the tables. This is the environment table. And it creates another table, loads some data, and it's just doing this. So basically, the application expects these to exist in the database before it's able to work perfectly. Okay, so part of the things that you would have to do as a DevOps engineer will be to support the developers to deploy this into some environment, so that at the end of the day, your users can go to the browser and load up the web page, and everything is going to work fine. So typically, developers will give you the code. You have access to the repository where they keep their code. You can be involved in supporting them in the writing of the Docker file for the application. And also you would help them in terms of the connectivity with the backend database, setting up the database, all this kind of things. So once that is all done, ready to go, it's just a matter of now deciding what the CI/CD pipeline is going to be like for the application. Okay, so there's a Jenkins file here, which basically it's just a bunch of echo, but we'll see what it looks like when we have the application. But basically, anytime this repository is connected to Jenkins, it's going to look for this file, Jenkins file, and it's going to run the pipeline based on what is being configured in this Jenkins file. Okay. Now, something just came to my mind quickly. The last time we were on a session, I was trying to do something, it just wasn't working. I was trying to make some changes to Jenkins, it wasn't working. So I figured out what the problem was. So I'm just going to quickly talk about that today so that you know what happened. So 1 second. So let me bring up my other Visual Studio. So let me minimize all of that. Okay, so I'm going to minimize all that. So what I need is this line. Okay, minimize that. Okay, minimize this. And we're focusing on this live class folder. Okay, now, where is it? Override values. Okay, cool. So this is our Jenkins file. So if you remember when we deployed Jenkins, we had a command like this. So let me just quickly go through that command for you. I'm just going to maximize this and bring this to the side a little bit. And then let's talk about this. So I'm going to put a command there so it doesn't run it. So we can have it in one, oops. So we can have it in one line like this, okay? So that's that. And then I'm going to do Helm LS. Is this big enough? Let me increase this size a bit. Okay, I think that works. Okay, so Helm LS tooling. So basically, we have, one sec. Okay, so we have a namespace called tooling. This namespace is the logical environment within our Kubernetes cluster that handles the deployment of some of the tools that we're installing. So in the tooling namespace, we have Jenkins installed. We also have Artifactory installed. So with Jenkins, we've had a number of revisions. So this is every time I run an upgrade, it increases the revision. And with this revision, we're able to do roll forward, roll backward, those kind of things. And then we have this, the chart version, okay? We have the app version as well. And the command to actually do the installation is this. So we run Helm upgrade. Now you can, the first time you're running this, it's going to be Helm install. Okay, after that, it will be Helm upgrade. And Helm is the tool that we're using to deploy into Kubernetes. Okay, Kubernetes is our orchestration platform that allows us to run containers in a distributed fashion. So we have a number of nodes in this cluster. If I do kubectl get nodes, it will tell us how many worker nodes we have in this cluster. So we have 3 worker nodes. And with our Helm install, it will install whatever application that we want to install in the namespace within the Kubernetes cluster. Now, the reason you might want to stick to using the upgrade is if you pass in this -i flag to it, which means to install. And if you're running it for the first time with Helm upgrade -i, it's going to check if it's already installed. If it's not installed, then it will do the installation. If you do not put the -i, it wouldn't do the install. You're basically telling it to only do an upgrade. Okay, so it just makes sense to always put a -I because it will work regardless if it's going to be the first time or not. So we have this Jenkins CI, which is the Helm repo. Okay, and then this is the Helm charts itself. So we've already added these Helm repos. So if you do Helm repo lists to list the different repos that I have configured, I'm just going to grep for Jenkins because I have a lot of repositories. You can see there is Jenkins, there's Jenkins CI. So both of them are actually pointing to the same repository. Okay, so whether we put Jenkins here in this command right here, whether I put Jenkins or Jenkins CI, it's actually pointing to both. Okay, so at some point I must have created the repo like this, but regardless, what is most important is for you to understand what's happening. So there is an upstream repository that has been configured, and to configure that, when you go to your artifact hub, where is it? It will tell you the command to use. As you can see, it says here Helm repo add Jenkins, and then it points it to the Jenkins chart. Okay, so that's how we would add the repo. Where is it? There we go. So we already have the repo. So that's where we can now specify this repo, which points to this repository right here. And then the chart is within this repository. So this repository would have quite a number of charts. One of them is this Jenkins. And then you can specify the version that you want to install. So we're installing version 1.1.13. If I go here and try to see all the different versions, this is the version we're installing. And this was released 13th July 2022. So after that, a number of other versions have actually been released. Now, if you don't specify the version, what's going to happen is every time you do an installation, it will always install the latest. And that can break your application if it has some changes that doesn't quite work well with the existing installation. So very important to always specify the version when you're trying to do your installation, okay? And then you have this -F right here, which specifies the values file that will drive the configuration of your installation, okay? So you have this values file right here. So it's pointing to some file on my file system. So in my users diary, downloads, all of that with my live classes, Jenkins, there is a file called the override values.yaml. So if I open that up for you, this is it right here. So these override values, this is the content. So we'll go through it quickly. But what I want you to quickly understand is this chart comes with a default values file. Okay, if we go to Artifact Hub, you will see this is the default values file here. And this is all the configuration for the default value file. So if I don't pass this -F and I stop right here and do the installation, it's going to install Jenkins, but it will use the default values that comes with the chart. But of course, that value will not be fit for everybody. Every team, every project have their unique requirement, right? So you're going to have to then create a values file to override the default one. So when you do that, you can then begin to put your own specific configurations that will drive your installation, okay? Now, so this is the default right here. So I have it local on my file system. So you can actually copy it from here as well. So if you click on this button and you can see it's copied, and then you can just go into your Visual Studio and basically paste it there, okay? So what I now have is I can now begin to configure my Jenkins however I like it. So for example, let's start from the top. The controller image is not what I'm using by default. Remember, we talked about this as well. The fact that we have need to use certain Jenkins plugins. So what I have done is to bake an image that has all the plugins that I want and then point the installation to that image. So rather than use the default one, so if I go to the default one and I search for controller, you can see here, controller image is pointing to Jenkins, and the tag is JDK11. But in my own case, I have these in my own Docker Hub right here. Okay, diary registry, Jenkins, and then I have the tag right here. So if I go to Docker Hub, this is my registry right here, and then where is it? This is a diary registry Jenkins, and if I go to the tags, you can see this is the tag that is being pointed to. Okay, and so that's why we have that here. So this is a typical scenario where you might want to use your Artifactory. So if I had this image in Artifactory, so let me log into Artifactory. So this is Artifactory. If I had that image here, even though I've created a Jenkins repo here, I'm not sure if I pushed it. Let me just go here, artifact. Okay, and if I go to Jenkins, I haven't actually pushed it here, but if I pushed it here, rather than point to Docker Hub, this is where I would point to. I'll just point to artifact.masterclass.diary.io, the Jenkins. It will be what will then be in this particular configuration. But one thing to bear in mind, though, is because it's a private registry, you're going to need to log into it. It's not public. So you then have to configure the image pool secrets that we'll use to do the connectivity to then be able to pull it. But because my registry is public, and it's there so that every one of you guys can actually make use of it, we don't need to authenticate to it, and that's why it's not using image pool secret. Okay, so that's the first bit of configuration. The other bit is the Ingress part. So we already have our Ingress controller. We just need to put annotations to make use of it. So here is where we're now putting the annotation to say, okay, use Nginx. And so if we now do kubectl get Ingress -n tooling in our tooling namespace, you can see we have, hang on. So we have Jenkins Ingress there. And this is what handles the traffic into the cluster. You can see it's pointing to this load balancer. And this load balancer has, it's pointing to the worker nodes, okay? So what happens is there is a configuration in root 53 that points this DNS to this load balancer. And this load balancer is the Ingress controller that handles the Nginx configuration that allows traffic to our cluster. So if you notice, part of the Ingress configuration here is, let me see if it's here. Okay, it's not here just because this is an override. But if we go into the default one and I put Ingress, okay, it has configuration within the stateful set. Okay, this is now going a bit deeper, but let me just explain it to you. So basically, Helm charts is a packaging of Kubernetes YAML files, right? Which has been packaged into some tar GZ. If you unpack that, you see all the stateful sets and service accounts or whatever configuration service that's been put in place. So the guys who developed this chart have actually configured it such that if Ingress is enabled to true, it will send the traffic to the backend service. So if we do kubectl get service -n tool, you'll notice that there is a Jenkins service right here, which is of the type cluster IP. So this Ingress right here will take the traffic anytime a traffic is sent to the host name, which is our Jenkins.masterclass.io. Anytime it sees that, it basically routes that traffic internally to Jenkins. And that way, you're able to then present in your browser your Jenkins like this, because this is the Jenkins.masterclass.io. I mean, you guys can even go there right now. It will load up for you. Okay, Jenkins.masterclass.io. You'll be able to get into it. In fact, let me even share the password with you. So let's 1 second. Let me send it. I'm going to send it in the chat for everyone. So let's copy this URL first of all. Okay, and then let me get the password. So this is the password. So the username is admin. So this is the password. Username is admin. Okay, so you guys can actually go in there and just explore. Don't break it. Okay, so we'll talk about some of these configurations shortly, the app and all that. So far, so good. This is just a bit of recap for the benefit of those who are still trying to catch up with us. Now, so we have the Ingress configuration as part of that. We also have these additional secrets. I explained this in the last time. I wouldn't want to spend too much time on that, but basically, this is the secrets that we're using to connect Jenkins with our GitHub. Okay, so that when Jenkins comes up, it's able to load up our GitHub repository. So right now, let's have a look at this. So this is our tooling app, and it's a multi-pipeline pipeline. So it's actually connected to this tooling repository, and it picks up this Jenkins file. So with that kind of configuration, the moment we destroy this Jenkins and install it again, it will load up this exactly like that. You wouldn't have to come in here and start clicking on new item, create a freestyle project or multi-pipeline or multi-branch pipeline or whatever. You don't have to do that. You actually have to ensure that everything is configured as code. Okay. So the part that handles that is this JCAC part. And that means Jenkins configuration as code. It's actually a plugin. So it's part of the plugins that we installed when we were baking our image. Okay, so there is a Docker file that handles that, which we had a look in the last few sessions. So this plugin is part of it, and we can now start configuring. So in this override, we've enabled it. We created this configuration part for the config script. And then this pipeline section is where we now call the jobs. And the first part here is the script. So we're putting the script together to create a folder. Okay, so that's the folder that gets created here. So this is the folder right here. And then the next thing is to then configure the multi-pipeline job. So we're saying it should be inside the dir.io folder, which is created above, and then create the tooling-app job. And this is it right here, tooling-app. Okay, so that's how this gets configured through our YAML values file. All right, and then we specify the credentials which it needs to connect to this GitHub. So with that, it's able to load up Jenkins, connect to this GitHub repo, and search for the Jenkins file and just run the pipeline. Okay, so whatever you've configured in your Jenkins file, it's just going to run that straight away, and you're happy to go. So there is another repository as well. So we'll come to that when we start talking about Kustomize, which does exactly the same thing. So it's pretty much just a copy of this, paste it, and just update the URL for the GitHub. So we'll come down to this shortly. And then there's a credentials section, which we have used to create the credentials so this is basically the username that I use to log into my GitHub account. And I've configured the service account that the secret rather, that it would then look for in Kubernetes to be able to connect to our GitHub. So we talked about all of these in our previous session. So if you haven't seen that, you can watch the videos. It will explain how that works. Okay, so that's enough of that. So what I wanted to do the last time that it was failing was just because there was a part of this YAML that, let me see, that was like this. Let me show you. So it was more like, I think it was this one, not sure, but it was like that. So even though it didn't show me that there's an error, the fact that the indentation had shifted, it just wasn't working. So I was deploying and deploying and it wasn't making any changes, but I figured out somehow that it was just the indentation. So very important. Just know that when you're creating a list, every time there's going to be like a 2 space. So 1, 2 is just between this and what is below it. 1, 2. So I'm using the arrow. Okay. And then after this controller, what is below it is also 2, 1, 2. So you can either use your arrow just to make sure, or space bar, just make sure you're doing that twice, or you can use the tab. So if I use tab for this, for example, you can see 1, 2 is actually 2. Okay. So, all right. So that's that. That was just the problem we have. But in case you have the same problem, just have a look at your indentation. Okay, so let's see if there are any questions. Any questions so far before we proceed? So someone is asking, does this process apply to when using EKS? I think I missed that. He also asked, is Helm synonymous to EKS in terms of functionality? So Helm is not the same as EKS. EKS is basically Amazon's offering of Kubernetes as a service. So when you have Kubernetes configured as service, you need to operate it. So Helm is one of the tools that you can use to deploy applications into your EKS cluster. To have a Kubernetes cluster, you have the option to build it from ground up yourself. You can use tools like KubeSpray, KubeADM, a number of options. You can even use Minikube. At the end of the day, they're all Kubernetes deployments, right? But the administrative overhead of installing and managing Kubernetes can be very, very overwhelming. So Amazon has an offering that takes care of all of that for you, and they just hand it over to you and say, here you go, just keep using your Kubernetes. We'll take care of the whole administrative part of things. So that's why it's called Kubernetes as a service, okay? And so Helm is completely different. So if you've been working with Kubernetes, you use tools like kubectl. So think of Helm and kubectl to be synonymous rather than Helm and EKS. So you can use kubectl to do deployments into Kubernetes. You can also use Helm to do that, okay? And then someone is asking, does this process apply to when using EKS? So I'm not sure what process. I'm so sorry. I didn't catch that when I was talking. So if you're the one that asked that question, you can actually unmute yourself and ask, and just let me know what part I was talking about that led to that question. Okay, so what we'll like to do today is to focus on our tooling app, get our tooling app up and running, and just have an idea of what a typical pipeline would be for that tooling application. So the first thing we want to do is to get our RDS up and running. So the tooling app, like I explained before, requires a backend database that we need to connect the application to. To save us a lot of time, I've actually done that ahead of time, because if we were to be doing that in this class, it will not be a good use of time. So for those who have done project 15 as part of your project at our direct attire program, you would have had experience putting an RDS instance together. Okay, so I've done that already. I've just created RDS cluster for development environments, for production and SIT. So you could have as many environments as you have in your organization. The reasons why you would have multiple environments is just because applications go through phases of testing before it eventually gets to production. Obviously, you start from development. So you start developing, your developers during development, there's going to be a lot of bugs, there's going to be a lot of issues, and you want to keep on iterating over that. Test them very well in development before you then take them to another environment for further testing. So you have different types of testing. You can have integration testing, user acceptance testing, performance testing, penetration testing. So you can set up different environments for those different kinds of testing. And so just for the sake of demonstration, I've just put together 3 environments. It doesn't mean it has to be 3. Some teams even have just 2. They go just from dev straight to production. It works for a lot of startups, but it gets to a point, it doesn't make any sense because you would want to invest a lot more time in doing a lot of testing just because you want to be able to release quality software. Remember, DevOps is about releasing very fast, at the same time, releasing quality. So quality comes when you do a lot of testing. It goes through a lot of different kinds of testing because you want to test what happens when someone hacks into your system. How do you respond? You want to test some of the configuration you put in place to protect yourself. Are those things working? You want to test them. You want to do browser testing. What are your customers going to experience when they use your platform on Chrome, on Safari, on Internet Explorer, on what's that other new one? I think it's called Blaze or something. It's one browser I started using recently, but Firefox and all that. So there's all kind of testing that happens.
Brave.
Sorry, Blaze, right? Yeah.
Brave.
Brave, thank you very much. Yes, because someone showed me that browser, and it's amazing because I pay for YouTube Premium where it doesn't show me adverts, and this browser literally solved that problem where you can watch YouTube all day long without any advertising. So yeah, if you haven't tried it, that's free adverts for them. You can go ahead and check it out. Okay, so we then have these 3 environments. So basically, for each of your environments, you want to connect your application to separate databases. You're not going to be using the same database, the one you use in dev with the one you're going to be using in production or any other environment. You want to separate those things. And so we have done that here. So if I click on one of them, this is the dev one, the connectivity side of things. So it has the writer instance and the reader instance. So if you connect to this one, you wouldn't be able to write anything to the database. You can only read it. But to be able to read, your application is going to need to connect to this one. Okay, so that's the one we're going to be using to connect our application to. All right, so we've done that. So let's go to the next one. So now we're going to introduce what is called Kustomize for deployment. So I know we've been talking about Helm, using Helm to do our deployments, writing Helm charts, okay? And basically, Helm is just taking your Kubernetes manifest and putting them in a template. In fact, let me just do one thing quickly. Let me just get the Helm charts for Jenkins and show you, for the sake of those who haven't really seen what Helm charts looks like. Where's Artifact Hub? Okay, there it is. And I'm just going to, where is it? Actually, apologies. I should have it here. Okay, so this is the Helm chart, right? So I'm going to copy that. And then I will do Helm fetch Jenkins. So this is downloading that chart. So as you can see, it has actually downloaded it right here. And it's a TGZ file, which means it's been packaged and compressed. So I'm going to untar it by doing tar-xbf, which is to extract that file, and Jenkins 413 TGZ. And if you notice, I did my Helm fetch and it downloaded the 4.1.13 version. Why do you think that happened when we have a 4.1.16? It'd be interesting to know if someone can tell me that while I'm still trying to untar this. Okay, so it's untarred it. So this is the packaged chart. So if you notice in there, it has templates, and this is all the different YAML files that have been templated. So rather than have your deployment.yaml, service.yaml, ingress.yaml, and all those, and then do your kubectl apply, to deploy your deployments, you can get all your YAML files, put them in this template, and basically run your Helm upgrade command to deploy everything. Remember this Helm upgrade? Just run your Helm upgrade, and then it will consider all the files that is in here, and based on the configuration that is there and your overriding values, it will just deploy the application for you, and everything's going to work fine. So if I were to just go into one of them quickly, let me just go into the stateful sets. So this is the stateful set. What you would notice is it has a lot of if and else, and it can even do loops. You can set variables, and all sorts of things can happen in here. That is one of the powers of Helm, and that's why it's called a templating engine. So if you are from a software development background and you work with Python, you would be familiar with Ginger 2, which is a templating engine with Python. Golang has a templating engine as well. So Helm was developed using Golang, and it's actually using Golang templating engine to do templating like that. So with this templating, what happens is, rather than hard code values that you need to drive your configuration, you can put templates. And this template, you can then tell it to search for the value in the values file. So say, for example, let me search for image colon, okay? So this is the part where normally in your deployment of stateful sets YAML file, you would have the value of the image, okay? Let me quickly just search, so Kubernetes stateful sets. Okay, so let's go into a stateful set. And by the way, stateful set is similar to deployments. It has a bit of a few differences, okay? So we won't go into details of that, but stateful set, as the name sounds, it's what makes your application stateful, because by design, Kubernetes was not initially designed to run stateful applications. They were designed to be stateless, okay? But there are requirements later on that led to creating Kubernetes objects like stateful sets that allows you to run stateful application, which means your pod is now able to store states. And when it dies and comes back up, you're still able to use the pod and the data that has been persisted. Okay, it has a few other benefits, but I wouldn't want to digress into that. But what I want to quickly show here is a typical stateful sets configuration from their documentation, and it would look something like this. So here you would have the part where you set the image value. So whatever image that your deployment or your stateful set is going to use to run the application, this is where you will set it. So normally your YAML file would look something like this. It's a key and a value configuration, okay? But what Helm is saying is you can actually template these values so that at runtime, you can change the value as you like. So if we had coded it like this, at runtime, we can't change it to anything. Imagine we're using version 0.8 in dev environment, and we want to use version 0.9 in our SIT environment because we want to do some testing for a new version. We won't be able to do that because it is hard-coded here. But with a templated engine, we're able to do things like this, where you can say, pick up the value from values.controller.image. So how do we get the value? Controller.image. So this is like a boilerplate. I mean, the initial values here, okay? So this .values basically goes to say, well, this is supposed to be a values. The value for this is supposed to come from the values file. Remember, we talked about the values file. Let me show you again. Oh, where is it? Okay, there we go. So remember, we talked about this values file, the default values file for Jenkins, and then the override. So the value for the image is now being specified here, where we can say controller.image. So the dot image that you see here is basically saying controller, and then within the controller, it has its own configurations. So it has the image, it has a tag, okay? And it has other configuration, but for as far as the image is concerned, this is the two important ones that we're interested in. So Helm allows us to have a setup like this where we can template things, okay? Now, we're now talking about something else. Where is it? Where's my notes again? Oh yeah, this is my notes. Okay. So we're now talking about the fact that, well, we want to use something else, Kustomize, and not Helm. So why would we want to do that? What is Helm doing wrong that we're not going to be using Helm for our deployment? I mean, at the end of the day, we wanted to install Jenkins, and we could go to artifacthub.io, and we could just literally install Jenkins out of the box without us having to do anything except for updating the values to suit what we want. Isn't that a good thing? Of course, it's a good thing, but it has pros and cons. There is reasons why you might want to use a templating engine. And so there's a new tool that's been introduced called the Kustomize, which has a completely different concept. And we'll go through that now. Now, before I proceed, I ask the question, don't think I forgot. So when I did my Helm fetch, it fetched the 4.1.13. And when I did that, I didn't actually specify a version, because if I did Helm fetch and I specified version 4.1.13, then I know it should do that. But I did this, and I mentioned the other time that when you run Helm install, upgrade, or whatnot, Helm fetch is the same thing as well. It should pull down the latest version. So why do you think in this case it did not pull down the latest version? Does anybody have an idea? Anybody wants to try? Someone says values file. No, we don't need a values file here. All we're doing is just downloading the chart. Okay, we're just downloading the chart, and we're expecting it to just download the chart from the repository that we've specified. Okay, but we didn't specify a version, and we can see from Artifact Hub that there is an updated version for the 1.16.
Yeah. Do you have any configuration in your system to always download that particular version?
That's a good thinking. So you're thinking in the right direction, that it must be reading some configuration file that is helping it with that information. So someone has said index.yaml. Good. So that's a good thing to say. There's a file, index.yaml. So there's an index file that actually stores that information on my system. I don't even know where it is. And but again, there is still something else that I was looking for. Thank you very much. So someone has just answered and said repo was not updated locally. So you have to bear in mind that anytime you are working with Helm, always remember that you need to run this command, Helm repo update, because this is what will then go into your remotes, understand what versions are there, and then update your index.yaml to then give you the latest. So as you can see, it says successfully got updates from, so these are the different repos that I have. We couldn't connect to a particular one, that's fine. So this is the index.yaml. This has a 4.1 error, it couldn't authenticate into it, which is okay. If I then do this Helm fetch again, it should then update and download the latest version. You can see that's 4.1.16, and now that's because I've now updated the index locally. So thanks a lot for that, Aya, for giving us that answer. Okay, so back to Kustomize. So now I have So this is our project 27. So our project 27 is where we started talking about Kustomize and all that. So for those who are in our projects, you haven't gotten to project 27, this is a, what's it called? A sneak peek into what it looks like. Okay, so let's quickly go through what Kustomize is. I think I did a Google search of it. Okay, so Kustomize is a tool for customizing Kubernetes configurations. It has the following features to manage application configuration. So you can generate resources from other sources, setting cross-cutting fields for resources, composing, all of that might be gibberish and not really explanatory enough. By the time you see it in action, it would make a lot more sense to you, okay? But basically, one thing I need you to understand is it uses a concept called overlays. So as opposed to what Helm uses, which is the templating engine, where you can template your values and set the values in the value file. Kustomize, on the other hand, uses what is called overlays. And then he also uses a file called the customization.yaml, where you can set your customization, how you want things to be customized. Now, when it comes to deployment into environments, you can then have your overlays and specify what's going to happen in your dev environment, what's going to happen in SIT. If you have many other environments, you can set whatever you want, create a new environment, and just keep working with it. So what we're going to do, we are going to start setting up our base. So first of all, it starts with the base. So it's like having a base configuration and then having overlays on top of it. If you think about it, it's also similar to what Helm is doing, because Helm has the base as well, which is where the default values file is. And then you can have your override that overrides on top of that. But the major difference is that you do not template using Kustomize. You literally set the key values in verbatim, more like hard coding the values in there. So if you had set a value, for example, your deployment.yaml in the base, in your prod environment, you would also have another deployment.yaml, but this time around, it's going to be patching what was here in your base. So if your base right here have set to have one replica, you can have the deployment here and set it to have 3 replicas. And every other configuration remains the same. So it's going to take the base, consider the patch, and whatever changes is there, it will just override it for you. So the difference, again, you don't template it, you don't use for loops or if conditions like you would in Helm. You just set the values exactly how you want it, and off you go. Okay, so we're going to do that now and see what that looks like. Any questions so far? All right, so okay, so now I have this base and overlays. There's nothing in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start creating the files one at a time. So I do have some of them on my other screen. So just to save us some time, I'll just copy and paste. But I don't want to show you that, because I want you to see how we're making changes and how things are applying and how it's all making sense. So we'll create a new file. We'll name it customization. YAML. Customization of YAML. Is that correct? Customization of YAML. Okay. And in that base customization, this is what we're going to have. Oops. I have to copy again and paste. All right. So very basic. So you have your kind customization. This is the API version that Kubernetes would understand working with. And the resources it's going to have at the base for now is going to be the deployment. And what we'll then have is we'll have our deployment.yaml. So let's get that. Okay, so this is what our deployment.yaml looks like. So let's just have a quick look at that. So in this deployment, we have the name deployment, tooling deployment. We have some labels. We have the replica sets. It's going to match the label. Basically, the concept of deployment is just a layer on top of your pod, right? So this is a section where you template the pod, and so that it can match the labels, and then your container configuration. So in this case, I'm using the there's a tooling app in my diary registry. So if we go to that registry, where is it? Repositories. Where is it? Tooling app. Okay, so this is the tooling app. So there's a few tags right there. Okay, and so this is pointing. Where is it? There we go. Okay, so it's pointing to the 1.0.2 version of this application. And by the way, this is the same PHP application I was showing you previously, which has been built through the Docker file in that repository. And it has some resource limits and request configured. The port is port 80, and that's it, very basic. Okay, so this is our base. All right, and let me see if there's anything we need. So for now, we don't need any other thing. We're okay with that. So in our overlay in dev environment, what we will then have, let's have our customization.yaml file again. So in our overlays, let's create our dev environment. So we'll have customization.yaml. And in this customization.yaml, this is what we're going to have. All right, so what we're having here is slightly different from what we had in the base. So for this particular customization, we are not telling it what namespace we want to deploy these, whatever resources that we're going to be deploying into our environment. Sorry, I need to quickly read this. Okay. All right, Mika, I've got your message. Haven't read everything, but I'll have a read through it again. Okay, and then so we want it to be deployed into a namespace called dev-tooling. And we are also telling it that we need it to understand that it needs to work with the base. Okay, so it's basically navigating to the base folder. So it's going one step back, another step back, and then into the base. So that's why you have these .. Okay, now Kustomize has its own documentation. So all these things are actually from their documentation. So if you go to customization, documentation, it's all there. So kustomize.io, and if you go to their docs, guides, so they have all these configuration sections there. So if there's anything at all that's you're not quite clear, you can always come here, search for things, and it will make sense. So basically, so it has this common label. Okay, so what it's able to do is to add this label. So if you want to drive your environment to make sure that there's a common label, even though your deployment can have its own label, but you want to make sure that all the resources that is being driven through this customization has a common label. You can set those kind of things here. It's key value. Okay. Now, the two major areas I need you to now focus on is the resources section and the patches strategic merge. So remember when I said that Kustomize uses this overlays concept. So it takes the base and then it patches whatever changes on top of it. So this is the patches section. So if there are resources that is not part of the base that you want this to be created as part of this dev configuration, this is where you will put that. Okay, so you have resources, namespace. And in the base, there is no namespace.yaml. So what's going to happen is you then have to create this namespace in dev and just put the file there. So you have namespace.yaml, which basically is just going to create your namespace, okay? And you do need that namespace to separate the different environment. And again, do not take this as that's how it should be for every environment. Some environments are separated based on namespaces. In some companies, you can actually have completely separate Kubernetes cluster per environment. So if you are a startup, small company, you're trying to minimize your cloud cost, you can actually use this strategy and it works perfectly well to separate your environment by using namespaces, okay? So this is just simulating something like that. So it's possible to actually have a completely dev environment, separate cluster, separate SIT cluster, and you can have just one namespace there doing your stuff. Okay, then the other part is this patches strategic merge. So anything that's in the base that you want to patch is what's going to come in this section. So deployment is in the base. You want to patch it in dev. So if there are specific dev configuration that's going to be different from every other environment, this is where you set it. So we're going to have to then put the deployments. So let's create a deployments.yaml for dev. And then we will put the configuration. So this is basically the configuration we're going to have. Now, it's showing red and it's not liking it. That's because Visual Studio is thinking this is a typical Kubernetes YAML configuration. So it's complaining about the syntax that this is not complete. So you can ignore that because we're working with Kustomize. Visual Studio is not aware of Kustomize. And I'm not sure if there's a Visual Studio code plugin for Kustomize. If there was, probably we'll have to install it to help it to understand that this is for Kustomize. So you can ignore this now. So what's going to happen is, if we choose to now deploy this, there's one more thing we need to do actually. Otherwise, we won't be able to see the application. So we need to create a service, right? So what we're going to do is let's copy this and create a service. And I'm going to ask you a question. So we're introducing this service now. And for now, I'm going to change this to load balancer. Okay, I'm going to change it to load balancer. So this is going to be our service. It's going to create a load balancer in AWS, and we can just access our application through that load balancer. So we'll come back to using Ingress and all that shortly. So we've introduced this service now. In this customization.yaml, where do you think we should put this service.yaml? Between these two, where do you think it should be? Does everybody want to try?
Can it be part of the service? I mean, the deployment as well for dev.
Yeah, so it's going to be part of the deployment for dev because it's already there now, service.yaml. But in this customization.yaml file,
It should be placed in the resources after the namespace as well.
Because it's just you think it should be in the resources, not in the patches section?
In the resources.
It should be in resources.
Okay, brilliant. So it should be in the resources. You guys are amazing students. You are very, very attentive. Thank you very much. Makes me feel like I haven't been talking to myself all along. So service.yaml should be here because it's not part of the base. So we're not really patching this, right? But actually, we should, if you think about it, because at some point, we are going to change this load balancer to cluster IP when we introduce Ingress, right? So maybe later on we'll change that, but we'll leave it as it is for now and try to run our Kustomize command. So Kustomize has its own CLI, so you can install Kustomize CLI and all that, but I don't think you should do that because now if you install kubectl, it's actually bundled as part of kubectl. So what you would do, let me see. So I'm in here. I think I should go into Kustomize folder. Okay. So if I do overlays, okay. So this is how you would run it. So rather than do kubectl apply -f that would normally do to specify the YAML file, you would do -k, which is the customized plugin that is now embedded as part of kubectl, and then you specify the overlays. So you tell it where the overlays folder is, and then it goes straight into your overlays, and then into the subfolder that you specify, which is the dev, and it will consider your customization.yaml and do whatever is there. So let's see whether what we've been doing is actually correct and if we're going to have an error or not. So we're having an error. It says failed to find unique target for patch apps, da da da. So why do you think we have this error? Why do we have this error? And this is referring to tooling deployment. So we have this dev deployment, tooling deployment. So the last time I had this error was actually because the positioning for the deployment of YAML was different. So let me see. Let me compare what I have here. So we have namespace, deployment. There is a YAML. Okay, so let's see if 1 second. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all of this, paste it, because I didn't want to put everything in your face initially, but I guess we'll do that, and then we'll reverse engineer and delete the things that we don't want. So 1 second. So we have this. So that's the customize. We have the deployment. Right, okay. I think I know what the problem is. So we didn't actually have content in there. So let me reverse this. It looks like it's because we didn't have anything there. I actually thought I pasted it. But let's do that now. Okay, let's run this again. Let's see. Okay. So you can ignore all of this. We'll come back to all that shortly. So I do have a working version. So because this kind of things happen when you're doing your demo, it's always good to have a working version handy and then reverse engineer from there. Okay. And then we have service. Okay, a second. Let me change the namespace. Could be because I had deleted the previous names. Let me just try that. Nope. Okay, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna run this. So let me clone this repo because this is one that works. So let's see what could be wrong. So it could be anything. That's what happens when you keep copying things around. So what I think we'll do is we'll walk through what we have here, okay? So that's I'll try as much as possible not to confuse you. What I wanted to do was to go in bits and then walk you the way up to the different changes that will be happening. All right. But to avoid having to do troubleshooting on a call like this, what I would just do is I'll just walk you through all the changes that has gone through each of the YAML files. So let's start with the customization. Okay. At least now you understand that the resources section and the patches section is differentiated based on what you intend to do with the YAML files. So for the patches, we're actually doing patch on what is in the base. So the base right here, we have our deployment, we have Ingress, we have service. Now in the dev section, we have our deployment. Now let's go through what's going on with this deployment. And I'll just run through it quickly. So first of all, we have the tooling app and the version that it's pointing to. This particular version is pointing to the 103, and it has a bunch of environment variables, which is based on, first of all, the location of the database. And the application is expecting that. So the username to connect, and then the password to use to connect to it. Now, if you notice already, we have coding password here. So we're going to sort that out when we get to the secret management section so that we wouldn't have to put any sensitive information. And then we have the MySQL DB. So we've run the overlay for dev. So let's have a look. So kubectl gets pod and dev tooling. And we have one pod that is running, and that is because in our dev environment, we have one replica that has been set, okay? Now, we also have Ingress. So one thing I would like to quickly reference, actually, let me see if this has a different configuration. No, okay, that's fine. So in dev, oops, this is GitHub. Okay, cool. So in dev, we have a number of annotations. So I'm going to quickly walk you through these annotations. We'll come back to this later. But first of all, the Cert-manager. Remember, we have our Cert-manager cluster issuer, which is the Let's Encrypt prod. And that's what's going to help us to have the certificate management the private key and the public key and all that. And then we have the Ingress controller class, okay, which is Nginx. Now we have the other configuration section for the host. So, which means if we go here to our browser, we should be able to see the application there. Okay, so we actually have the application loaded. We didn't have to do much configuration. Literally, by having all of these, everything is just ready to go. It's connected to the database. You can see the traffic is encrypted. It has the certificate itself is valid, okay, issued by R3, which is, if I click on the details, you'll see it's from Let's Encrypt, okay? And then it's pointing to our internal service, which is the tooling service right here, based off of cluster IP. What I wanted to do before was to initially do it with a load balancer, but Kustomize is not happy with the way I'm copying things around. So just to save us a lot of time, it's better we just go through this way. Now, we have another annotation, which is interesting. I'd like to share with you. Where is it? Ingress. So this annotation is called external DNS. If you notice in the last class, what we had to do was we had to go into root 53 to configure our DNS so that we can point it to the load balancer. Okay, so like if I do get Ingress on our dev tooling, you can see that this tooling app dev masterclass is pointing to this load balancer. But with this external DNS, it's going to help us to dynamically update Root 53 without either going through Terraform to update Root 53 or going manually into AWS to do that. So if we deleted this Ingress right now, it would also do the same thing, go into Root 53, update the configuration, and we don't have to do nothing about it. So it's actually an application on its own, which gets deployed. So let's see if we go to Artifactory. You can see there is an app called External DNS. So you can actually deploy this, go through the configuration options. It has its own default values as well. And one of the things that you would have to do is basically, depending on the cloud provider that you're using, in our case, we're using AWS, you just specify the hosted zone. So if I go into our AWS right now, Root 53, you'll see the record has been updated there. So we have these masterclass.io, and where is it? So this is the tooling app dev. So this is the record, and it's just been updated here. Okay, and it also creates this TXT record. So this is what it's using to do to confirm that you actually own the domain, and also to be able to understand how it's going to manage it going forward. So you drop some record in there that helps you to understand whether or not it needs to update it when you make changes, whether it needs to delete it. You know, it does its own thing. But what you would need to do after you have deployed the application into your environment will be to add this annotation right here. So with this annotation and the host name that you want it to manage, it's going to do all the magic for you without doing much. All right. And then, of course, the TLS section is where this would require for Cert-manager to kick in and do its own bit as well. And if you do things like kubectl get certificates in your dev tooling namespace, you'll be able to see the certificates, it's true. And if it wasn't properly configured, you will see this will be set to false. And if you also do get secrets, you will see that this certificate is actually stored in the form of a secret. So you can see it's a Kubernetes TLS type of secret. And if I do something like this, so get the output in the form of YAML, get the secret, put the name of the secret. Let's drag this up a bit, clear the screen. You'll be able to see that the TLS key, which is the private key there, and the certificate itself is stored in the form of a base64 encoded data. If you decode that, it's going to give you the actual certificate. All right. So that's that. So in dev, we have pretty much, where is it? So pretty much deployed to dev, and we didn't have to do any Helm charts, templating or anything like that. So we want to start making changes to dev. We can come here and do our key value pairs. If the password to the database changes for any reason, we will have to come here, update that. But we'll see how we work next. So let me go back to my notes and see if we're not going out of what we intended to discuss. Where's my notes? Can anyone find it? Oh, there we go. Okay, so we've talked about the external DNS connecting the tooling app with the database. So I'll put this here. Let me see. So this is the part. Okay, so yeah, I talked about this when we had this Docker file. So where it sets the environment variable, and we had to override that. Let me just delete this so it doesn't keep confusing us. Okay, so we have it inside our GitHub. Okay, so yeah, so this is where we're overriding the environment variables that's been configured in the Docker file, okay? So what we'll do next, let's go back to my notes. Keep looking for these notes every time. Oh, I hope I didn't delete my note just now.
You deleted it.
I did. Okay, that's fine. I have it written somewhere else anyway. So I'm gonna whisper it out. All right, 1 second. I'm actually looking for Slack. All right, cool. Because I posted it on Slack as well. So I'm gonna get it out. All right, cool. So we've talked about external DNS, connecting our tooling app with the database, updating Kubernetes to override the container defaults. We've talked about that. We've tested that the app works. So we're going to do that from dev to production. So what I'd like to do for production is to now talk about the parts where we manage our secret. So say, for example, well, it's okay to have it hard-coded in dev like this, no problem. Nobody really cares much about dev, but we do care a lot about production. So in production, we don't want to hard code this. What we're going to need is we're going to need a tool like Vault. So let me see if I have Vault open. Okay, 1 second. So let's get Vault out. So I have already deployed Vault. Okay, so we're going to just get that and go to the Vault UI, and I'm going to log into it. So Vault is a tool that you would use to do what is called secret management. Now it has different engines. Okay, so for example, if I want to enable a new engine, these are the different options. You can use it to manage your AWS IAM credentials. You can use it to connect to your Linux systems and even manage your users, dynamically changing their SSH private keys. So you store your private key here, and it basically just works seamlessly. Anytime there's an update to your SSH key, it updates your Linux systems and your application basically doesn't get to break. You can connect it with your Active Directory, and it does do quite a bit of things. I think they've actually added a few more things. It wasn't even as much as this the last time I checked. You can even have a complete PKI infrastructure set up here so that you become your own issuer of certificates. So you can have like a root certificate and then set up an intermediate certificate here, which will then sign new certificates that you can use for application. That's if you have your own PKI infrastructure, talk about the SSH and all that. So what we will be using is the KV engine. So we already have that already. So this is the KV engine right here. It's been enabled. So if I go into it, I've already created a path for the tooling app. And then for each of the environments, there are subfolders where you keep your secrets. So it's a key value store. So if I go into dev, for example, there's a key and the value. So if I open it up, this is the password for our MySQL access. And then this is the user as well. So the reason why you would want to keep your user in here as well is, if you think about it, it's also secret. Even though username, yeah, you can get to see username, but it's still a secret, because if someone has that information that your username is called admin, at least half of their job is done. Someone who's trying to hack into you, right? They only now have to worry about the password. But imagine if even your username and password is taken away from your, let me actually minimize this so it doesn't keep coming up. Okay. So imagine we now do away with this one. Where is it? So these two. Okay. That means the only thing that will be left here is just the name and the host name. So if you like, you can even store the other ones in your database, in your vault, it's fine. And if you have this yellow squiggly thing coming up, it's just because, like I said before, this is customized. Actually, this one, we can actually fix this right away. It's expecting the resource request and limits configuration. So I can just bring that here, and that should fix that part of the problem. Okay, so that's taking that away. So it's just expecting that. Okay, so assuming we want to remove this, so let's actually remove this. And before I remove that completely, so we're working with prod now. Let's go into that container that is running for dev and just quickly show you what's going on. So if I do kubectl exec into the pod -m dev tooling -- bash, so that I can get into the container. If I then do env and then grep for MySQL, because this is the environment variable, starts with MySQL _. So you can see the different environment variables that is exposed inside the container. So that's what the application is expecting, so that you can have the environment variable key and values. Okay, you can see the password is set, the name and everything. Okay, so but if we then deploy our prod and we remove the DB name and the database user and password, obviously it's not going to work. Let's even do that. So let's deploy to prod. Overlays. So this is deploying to prod. Did I save it? I think I did. Okay, so if we get our pods and check in prod, so we have the application running the last 6 seconds, and we're having 6 just because we have 6 replicas set here. So it's patching the base, and we're having 6 replicas. So if we now go into this container, in fact, even before going into the container, let's get the ingress. Okay, so this is our ingress. At the moment, I believe the certificate will probably not be ready yet because we just deployed it. Okay, it's even true, so it's ready. That was fast. And let's go there. So it's not working yet. This is not because of the password that we removed. This is actually because the DNS has not yet properly propagated. If I go to dnschecker.org and put in that, let's see if it is propagated. So you can see it hasn't been propagated yet. If I change this to dev, so dev is working fine. Okay, so let's just wait for it. So it'll take a bit of time. So dev is indeed working fine, but if you change to prod, okay, so that's still going on, no problem. We'll come back to that. And then let's now continue working on making sure that our prod environment does not have hard-coded secrets there. So we already have the secrets configured in Vault. Okay, so username and password in Vault. But one thing you need to bear in mind is there was a configuration that I have done that connects Kubernetes and Vault together. So basically, if you Google Vault integration with Kubernetes, this is a very good. This is a very good exercise for you. So if you can deploy Vault and then connect it with Kubernetes, it's well documented in the documentation. You can see all the guides, installation with Helm, and there's so much. So it's actually quite a lot of work. Okay, I must warn you ahead. Now it's part of project 27 as well, I think. All right. So for those who are on the program, you can also leverage that. But otherwise, it's right here. You can just go through HashiCorp. So HashiCorp are the owners of Vault, just in case you didn't know. The same guys who developed Terraform, Vagrant, and Console. If you work with this, they are also the ones here. Okay, so I've muted that person. If you want to ask a question, feel free to ask questions. It's just that so that we don't cause distraction for others. All right. So now that you know there is a configuration that has to be done to integrate Vault and Kubernetes together, that has been done. What we now need to do is to put the annotations for our deployments to now understand that it needs to work with Vault. Okay, so I have those annotations. Okay. Sorry, 1 second. I'm just trying to get the right annotations out. Okay. All right, so we have a number of annotations that we're going to use here. So let's just copy these, including the service account. And then we're going to have to paste it. So we want to paste it for there. So let me just minimize the phone. Actually, I'm just wondering why. Oh, right. Okay, I know why. Because it's in a different branch. Yeah, that's fine. So right below the. So I'm just going to put it right below the environment variables. So I'll walk you through these annotations shortly. Okay. So first of all, there is the vault.hashicorp agents inject to true. So basically, the way it works is Vault is going to deploy an extra container, which is called a sidecar container. So that sidecar is going to be in charge of injecting the secrets into the container from Vault. So the same key value pairs that we have in Vault is going to extract that and export it as environment variables in the container. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to put this like this. So let me just put export here. And by the way, these literally examples are examples that you can literally copy and paste from HashiCorp documentation. They've also documented how this works. So basically, you put this one to say enable the agents inject, and then always update it, which is anytime there's an update to the secret in Vault, it's also going to update the container to have the up-to-date data for the secret. And then there's a role. So if we go to Vault, there is, if you go to the access, this is the configuration with Kubernetes. Okay, and then it has this prod role that's been configured. So as you can see, it actually bounds a service account to prod, and that is the service account that we are also specifying here. You can see the service account name. So we specify the service account. So there is a service account here that is being created. Where is that? Okay, so it's, where is it? Right, okay. It's because I'm actually in a different branch, that's why. So let's get the branch out. So the branch, yeah, no, not this one. Okay, so the branch is called Feature Vault Integration. It's capital. I'm just going to stash my changes so I can check out into that. So I'm going to cancel this, don't save. And then you can bring out all the changes. So instead of copying and pasting. So that's why we now have the service account. So this is the service account. So by the time we run this deployment again, it's going to create the service account, and then it's going to work with it, based on this configuration here. So the role in Vault, which is connected to this service account, allows it to be able to talk to Vault and then it's able to pull the secret. So someone has said it's becoming a bit complex. I know, I can completely understand. This bit especially can be complex, but trust me, at the moment, do not focus too much on the annotations and all that. Okay, focus on the end goal. What are we trying to solve? What we're trying to solve is to ensure that we don't have hard-coded databases information like this. So we want to be able to dynamically inject that into the container. When you go through actual deployment of Vault and configuring the connectivity with it with Kubernetes, then this will become a lot clearer. It's just because I have done it pre ahead, that's why it's a bit kind of complex, okay? But it is not complex by the time you get your hands on it. If I were to do the whole end-to-end deployment on our session, we wouldn't have enough time and it wouldn't make a lot of sense, okay? So that's why I had to do it ahead of time so that we can just talk through it quickly and just see it in action, okay? All right, so without saying too much about these annotations and just getting straight into it and see what's going on, what I'm just going to do, I'm going to make a few quick changes. But before I do that, let me just deploy first of all, because when I deploy it, it's going to work, but you notice that the secrets are still there. So I'm going to have to remove the secret for it to actually work. I don't like these yellow things that's there, so I'm just going to copy this and just paste it to remove all those yellow stuff, those squiggly lines. Okay. All right. So I can apply again. Okay. So get Ingress for prod. Let's see if the DNS has been sorted out. Okay, good. So the application is loaded. Well, not loaded quite well because it looks like it's not happy. It's not able to find the password to connect to the database. That's why you're seeing that. But let's see. So let's go into the container and see what's going on. Okay, some of the applications, the old ones are still running. Okay, this is pending. Okay, the only reason why this will be pending is because of the service account. So we have the service account created. Let's just confirm in Vault. This is the name of the service account, is bound to prod. Okay, good. Okay, so one of them is running fine, which is good. Let's refresh this, actually. So that's dev. Okay, so prod is back up. Okay, good. So let's go into the container. Oops. Exec. Get into the container. Okay, so env grep MySQL. So we're still seeing these, and that's because it's actually still the environment variable is still set there, and that's why this is showing up here. It's actually not this. This has kind of kicked in, but it is not the one that is making this environment variable here. But what I would like to show you is where Vault is now going to store the secret for us. So if we go into, there's a folder on the file system called Vault Secrets. And that's where you will see this database config.txt. Okay. And that is why we have this thing here, database config.txt. So if we open that up, you can see this is where it's setting MySQL password equals to masterclass .com that, and then we have the MySQL user equals to admin. So this root at tooling whatever is not part of it. So this is just the user name and the name of the container. Okay, so it ends here. Okay, so this is how the templating of the secrets will happen. So this part of the annotation is what is creating this content in this file. So this file, database-config.txt, is what you're seeing here. You see everything before it, all of these, agent, inject secret, agent, inject template, these are things that HashiCorp Vault have provided, and they've said that whatever you put after that becomes the name of the file on the file system in the Vault secret. Okay, so how do we then make use of this? So the good thing is we now have a way to dynamically inject secrets into our container. If we changed the value of this secret here, so if I go back and I go back here, okay, so if I come in here, so I can actually show the JSON format, and I come here, change the value, save it. What's going to happen is dynamically inside this container, this file is going to get updated, and the latest value of the secret is going to be populated here. Okay, so, but bear in mind, the reason why it's working at the moment is just because we still have this hard-coded in here. Okay, so I'm going to now have to remove this. Okay, so we're going to have the IP address and so on. So guys, we're almost done. I know it's becoming overloading, so we're just at the last tip right now. Okay, so we have that removed. If I exit and we run a new deployment, our application is going to break just because let's wait for the containers to restart. So you can see it's terminating them, and it's going to start bringing up new ones. So the new ones in the last 6 seconds are starting up. Okay, so if I check again, the pod is initializing, and what's going to happen is this application is going to break now because, okay, so it's still connected. Okay, so now it's broken, and the reason it's broken is just because that it's not able to see the username and password anymore. Even though Vault has injected this into this file, we're not making use of it. It's basically just there doing nothing. Okay, so how to now make use of it? Let's see the ports. So it's terminated. Some of them are running, so this is going now. So how to now make use of it is we just have to format this this config.txt file in a way that we can source it, right? It's just like, okay, for example, if I go into one of the containers, now that it's not actually working, so let me do this. So if I exec back into the container, so what I'm going to try to do is to make sure that that file, excuse me, so make sure that that file can now has Vault secrets database config. Okay, so we have this, and if I do env grep MySQL again, you can see the MySQL password is empty, MySQL user is empty, so that's why the application is broken. So if I now go into this file, okay, Sure. Okay, there is no vi command in this container, so I can't actually edit this file in this container. But what I was going to do is to simulate a situation where it's going to make it work. I can actually do that. So let's do it from here. So what I will do is I will make this in the form of a shell script. Okay, so, and then I will export this. Okay, export. All right, and then I will remove this .txt so that it's not going to be just a text file, and just save that. So let's run the deployment again. Okay. And actually, to make this easy next time, I'll probably just make this one replica just to make it easy for us to quickly test things. Yeah. Export. Okay, so we have the new pod running. So if I go into this now, exec. Okay, and I go to the vault secret. So we now have database config. So we remove the .txt. So that's why we have like that. And now we have exports, like that. So if we do env grep mysql, we still don't have that. So what we're now going to do is to source this file. So if we source this file and do env again, you can now see that it's able to populate the environment variable. So what we now need to do is find a way to ensure that once this container is up and running, we're able to source this file and that the process running the application is going to be able to pick up the environment variables and then it'll be able to work with it. So to do that, what we will do is we'll now have to update the container. So what I'll do is I'll just find a way. If I refresh this, the application is still going to, actually it should work now that only on one of the ports though. So if I keep refreshing, it should hit one of the ports that has the environment variable. Yeah, if you keep doing it, it should hit one of them. But anyway, so let me find a template. Kubernetes command args. Okay, so what I want to be able to do is to find an example. So let me just take this. I'll explain to you what this is doing shortly. Okay, so let me see where under name image, yeah. So under name image, let's just drop it in here. So this is how I do these things. Sometimes if I want to do something, I just go find the exact example, paste it, find out what location it is, and then update it exactly how I want it to be. Now, what I want to do is to override what we have in the container. I mean, in the Docker file. So let me find out Docker file again. Okay, so this is the Docker file for application. So the entry point here is to run this command, start Apache. Okay, so basically we're just going to run that source command and start Apache. So that way we can source it, load it in the environment variable, and then be able to start the application. Okay, so I'm going to copy this, and then I would do something like, instead of this print env, I'll do bin bash -c. So that's how you would specify that. And then I can actually put this here. I don't need the command. I don't need that either. Okay, so it's going to be in one command. So what I would then do is I will do source. So what are we sourcing? We want to source this. Okay, and put a double ampersand to then start this application afterwards. So what this is going to do is it's going to, so basically we're overriding the entry point that we had from the Docker file. And then we're going to source this database config first of all, and then start the application. Okay, so let's see if this is going to work. So I've changed this to one replica so that we can quickly get over with this. Get pod. So it's going to turn everything. Okay, so we have a runtime error. So maybe it's not quite happy with what we have. We'll have to do a bit of troubleshooting here. So describe pod and pod student. Oh, bin bash. Okay, so this is the problem. So it's supposed to be bin bash. So the way we could figure out is to describe the pod that's failing, and it was able to tell us why that happened. All right, so let's check again. Okay, so it's now running. Right, so if we go here and refresh it, now it's able to connect to the database because it's able to pick up the environment variable, the secret. But another thing, let me quickly show you that. Exec into the container. Okay, so if you notice, if I grep for the environment variable again, here we grep. Hang on. Right. Okay, MySQL. If you notice, actually, in the environment variable, even though it's sourcing and exporting it, it's still not showing up here in the environment variable, which is fine. I mean, we can see the application is working fine. But does anybody know why this is the case? That even though we have this in the vault secret what's it called, database config. So we already have it exported, and we have this source command that is basically running this. Okay, but when we go into the container and check in that session, we are not able to actually see it loading the data coming from Vault. Can anybody try to tell us why this is the case? So definitely the data is there, it's seeing it somehow, it's just not showing up when we check from the env through the env command. Any ideas? Okay. Someone says because it's a secret. Well, yes, it is a secret, but at least it should be available to the process that needs it. And it's actually a good thing that even if you come into the container like that, you can't even see like that. And this is, you're probably going to face this at work somewhere down the line. You know, we're trying to do troubleshooting, you're trying to make sense of what's going on, and you don't seem to find the secret in the environment variables. But the application is actually working. So how is it working? Where is it picking it up from? No. So someone said from the sidecar. So the sidecar's job is just to get a secret, put it into the container, the application is running. So if it's in the sidecar, the application won't be able to see them. Now, someone says because of the encryptions. No, it is actually not encrypted. So it's in clear text, it's picking it up from Vault, is exposing it to the application from environment variables. Now, the reason is because that secret is only visible to the process that started it. Okay, so the process that started it here, that ran this bin bash -c command and did this source, is only able to see this data. So when I ran the exec command to get into the container and I put --bash, that is another TTY entirely, which I'm doing this env and it's not able to see it. So there is a session that is only available to this process that started the application. So if I do ps -aux, this is the process ID that started the application, and it's only this process that can see it. So can't remember top of my head, but we can Google it. So Linux, actually, let me just environment process. How do I search for this? Environment variable. Okay, environment variable available only to Linux process. Something like that. Let's see if it comes back. So there's a command we can actually run to check in one of the, not how can I set an environment? Actually, I think I have the command written somewhere. Let me see if I can find it. Definitely have it somewhere. Nope. Okay. Let's try to tweak it and remember. Actually, let me see. I might be able to try. So if I do cat, etc. Okay, so cats for okay. So every process have their own ID. So we know that the process ID we're looking for is number 1, and it's a file in this proc directory. So if I do cats on proc /1, so it's actually a directory. So let's list what's in there. I think environ, that's the one. Yeah, that's the one we're looking for. /environ. Okay, so if I then grep MySQL here, says binary file. Okay, let's see. Maybe we can just have a look through and see. Can anybody see it? It should be here. Let's highlight it. Okay, look at it. MySQL pass is right here. Okay, so this is what we're looking for. So MySQL pass equals to Masterclass that, and then the MySQL user as well should be somewhere in there. So you can see the IP is also here, the location of the RDS and all that. So basically, the reason why we couldn't find it in the environment variable is because it is only available to this process that started the application. So the PSOX, so this process here, process ID 1, which started this, is the only one that has access to it. Okay. So I guess that's most of the things we want to do. So finally, now that we have everything, we have all our overlays, we have everything. If we're not working with developers, they're pushing their code, we want to move everything through a pipeline. What will typically happen is you have your application. So this is the application, you'll have its own pipeline. And let's see, typical application, if you open it up in Blue Ocean, you'll see, let's see, open this one. So you see, you build the software, you have unit tests, you put a quality gate somewhere, and then you can then load up an upstream job to start doing the deployment. Okay. So this is our upstream job, this other one right here. So this is the other one, which will then have all your base overlays that would then trigger a deployment. That's the one that will then run your kubectl apply based on the feature branch that is meant to do the deployment. It will then decide whether to deploy to dev, to SIT, to pre-prod, to production, or whatnot. So time wouldn't permit us to go deep into these and then show you what the pipeline would look like and all that, but at least it gives you a much more conceptual understanding in terms of how these kind of things work. So it's a lot of work. Okay, these are projects that can take several months working within a team, just making sure that everything is well automated, nothing is manually done, security is well taken care of, all those kind of things. You have your headache around Terraform as well to build the entire infrastructure that sets up your EKS or VPCs and all that, But the same concept applies whether you're working with GCP, Azure, AWS, it doesn't matter. It's the same concept. You just learn the tool specific and then apply the same concept to, get your application up and running. So thanks a lot for spending your time with me this evening. I know it's been...
Larry, I have a quick question.
Yes. So let's start taking some questions.
Yeah, the question I have is the application, right? I know when you were building the Kubernetes cluster, did you put it in the nodes and the port? Did you put it in the private subnet or public subnet?
Yes. So the nodes are in private subnet, and even the database as well, the RDS, is in a private subnet as well. So there's a security group that allows traffic to go from the container, which is running on a node in a private subnet, to then go to the application, to the database that is also in a private subnet. So you can't reach the database from the outside world. You can't even reach your nodes, your worker nodes, from the public directly. No, they're in private.
Okay. So hold on. So you tell me the application. How about the application? Application is exposed to the public. It's exposed to the public, right? So what I'm thinking in my head is, if the application is exposed to the public, how do they route traffic from the public to the private subnet? Maybe,
Yeah. So the way it routes traffic is, remember the Ingress controller that we did? That creates a load balancer,
okay,
which is in the public subnet. Okay.
Okay.
That takes the traffic and then sends it down to the private because it has access to the private. So you've done the project 15, exactly the same thing. Remember in project 15, we created the load balancer in the public subnet, and then has the traffic down to the application in the private subnet. So exactly the same concept.
Okay, gotcha. All right, that's something that I just wanted to ask, and I was curious about.
All right, cool. All right, so I'm trying to read someone's question. Okay. All right. So Mika, you can send me a message on Slack privately, and we can deal with this question of yours. So it's relating to your project and project 11 Ansible. So we can have a look at that separately because it's outside the scope of what we're doing here today. Okay. So in the absence of any questions, so what's going to happen is today is actually the end of the series that we're doing. So I think we have a batch C that is ongoing already. So we're going to continue. If you're on batch C, we're going to continue on that. I think maybe I'll let you know what the dates are. Okay. And then the batch D will start afresh. So basically, if you're on any batch and you feel like you're not confident enough, you want to start a new batch, feel free to join the new batch. We'll communicate the dates, and then you can start all over again. And because we know this thing is very, very, very complex. It's difficult. It's not easy. Okay. But it is easy. It only takes time. So if you're able to give yourself time, do not be in a hurry. That's what I tell everyone. Don't be in a hurry to go and start making money. The money is not going anywhere. It is there waiting for you, right? But just be confident enough to be able to go for interviews, and you're confident that you'll be able to answer questions confidently. You're able to talk about the things you do. Spend time doing projects. Okay, it's one thing to watch videos, you can kind of understand, but your understanding at that point is just probably 20 to 30%. Trust me. It's when you get your hands on projects and you face issues, those challenges are the experiences that these companies are looking for. So if you're able to get yourself in that position where you can do a lot of projects and all that, then definitely you will get there. So yeah, and then of course, these recordings is very, very good. You can pause, rewind, and yes, you will get the recording. So if you need to reach out, if you're not on our platform at all, you need to reach out. Remember, you can send an email to support@dari.io. Okay, you want to ask questions, you want to enroll, you want to get started, you want to do whatever. Also feel free, please share about dari.io to your network. Give us feedback as well. If we're doing something that is not quite good enough, please let us know. We are a startup. We're trying to help as many Africans out there in the world, and using our social learning, project-based learning strategies, we want to be able to help everyone be able to confidently work as DevOps professionals. Okay. All right. So thank you very much. I'll catch you guys later.
Thank you.
Thank you.